Hey everyone, I'm Nido King, and today's episode has been a long time coming. We're gonna fight the boss. I'm not really sure that it matters which cloak I wear for this one, because I don't know whether any of Brigantia's attacks fall into any of the elements I've got protection against. The battlefield cloak is probably the most sensible choice, but I figured I'd go with something thematic. As always, there's one room we've got to clear before we get to the Folklore. And this really doesn't look like too much of a challenge. I don't even really feel like switching to Peg Powler for this one. I got greedy. I should have waited until after he was done to grab the picture book page. Especially since I got a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like. And I thought the fight as Keats was disappointing. And it looks like I do have to switch to Peg Powler anyway. But let's see what fighting Brigantia is going to entail. Zap its tail with electricity, cut its tail apart, zap the head with electricity, and blow it up with Gargantua. Pretty much exactly the same as the Keats fight, except using electricity instead of ice. Which I think is going to make the fight a lot harder just because Ellen doesn't have any really good thunder attacks yet. Oh yeah, that's right. Peg Powler for the blue stones. And one of the ones on the side should be my large life drops. Or small life drops. Oh, I get it. There's a whole second half to this room. And now it's just 3 Elroni. The good news is, I got pretty good at fighting these guys during the grinding video. Having cut most of that out, of course, for your sanity and mine. It's basically just a matter of lots of long-range attacks, so that I can take advantage of the brief times when they're vulnerable, and do a whole lot of damage. Bullseye's great. Fraxinus is pretty good, because they are vulnerable to the slash element, as we discovered when we had to defeat them with themselves. And they really don't take a lot to put down once the red id pops out. I do want to catch one. I mean, granted, I don't want to grind too much experience as I go along, but this certainly isn't too much. And that, I believe, will be the crystal with my large life drops. Fortunately, Bullseye is a better blind shot than I am. So, let's see. I'm going to need electricity. Got my slash element ready to go. I think we're ready to take this guy on, don't you? Yep, exactly the same fight, exactly the same boss, and a room that's structurally identical to the one in the Swamp of Oblivion. He doesn't really stick around all that much. And like I said, the problem is that Keats had Auguski, he had Kraken, really effective ice element attacks. Whereas Ellen's kinda stuck with either Gaboy or Hobbleby for thunder attack. Neither one of them is very good at hitting targets that aren't near the ground. And of course, it's really easy to get impatient when the boss is just darting through the room. I mean, anybody who has ever been annoyed at those eel enemies from Super Mario 64, you need to fight this guy. Okay, so his tail is now crackling with electricity. Now I gotta slash it. The problem is, he moves around so much, and I can't target the tail specifically. So I think Ogma's probably the best choice for slashing him. The downside is when he gets that far away, I really can't hit him. As you can see, the few times when I even aim correctly, Fraxinus's slicing shockwave doesn't go high enough to hit the tail. So I'm pretty sure that the suggestion in the picture book was specifically Ogma. I'm not sure that there is any visual difference between Ogma and Fraxinus. I kind of assume those mines are water element attacks, but you'd have to really be trying or not paying attention to get hit by them. They don't have a very big blast radius. I think Brigantia might have one attack that would be considered Destroy element. And Hobbledy is just not very good for hitting him. I guess that did the trick. I just don't like having to use a lot of attacks that require charging against enemies that move as much as Brigantia does. And the worst part of Hobbledy is that it sits out there for a while, and with Ellen's attacks, particularly the ones in this chapter, I've noticed that while they're out there, if you try to target, you're going to target your own folk instead of the one you're fighting. That really becomes an issue mainly with folks like Alrane, but it happened to me at least once with Hobbledy in this fight. So, for the most part, I end up sticking with Gaboy. At the very least, if you've gotten its fourth combo attack, then that Cage of Electricity goes high enough to hit Brigantia. If you didn't, then I really don't know what you do for this fight. Probably die and start over from the portal again. Well, Ogma was doing a pretty good job. And I guess Brigantia becomes completely immune to all damage while it's spinning around. That's the attack that I think might be a slash element, because it's got those sharp fins. And now we're down to just a head, so we gotta go for the destroy element. And this is when the fight becomes a lot more dangerous. This is why I've been using Kilmulas instead of Patriot, because you never know which direction the damage is going to come from. And that's Hobbledy once again doing nothing. At all. I thought as long as it's sitting still, Barghest will probably be more effective. I have no idea what caused me to come up with that idea. I'm going to run halfway across the room just to zap it a couple times, and then by the time Barghest gets its attack, it's already on the move. Perfect timing. Use an electric attack while it's still electrocuted, and then pull out Barghest just when it ends. I think that's the only hit that Barghest scored in the whole fight. Not very practical. And I'm totally out of MC now. Fortunately, all that flailing about it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to hit me. And again, it starts moving before I can even attack it. So just like with Keats, Gargantua was the way to go here. I would be interested to know if you even can hit it with something like Ambush or Korobuna. Hey, there's the red id. Good thing I noticed before it disappeared. And this one's really hard to balance because it's hard to tell when it's upright or what upright looks like. But beating it to death is one of those things I'm really good at. I don't know why. It's just tilting the controller back and forth is a lot easier to do. Well, that's kinda my job. There's that Seal of Baral again. Everybody keeps mentioning it all of a sudden, but I've never heard of it. The Seal of the Lighthouse, is that the same thing as the Seal of Baral? I don't think the Fairy Lord is going to be taking the lead in any battles. Ellen's going to be doing it. And Keats is going to help. It was kind of weird that Hervé was so reluctant to tell Ellen who it was that sent him away from the Swamp of Oblivion. We know it's Dr. Lester because we met him as Keats. I just don't really see that as being a major detail, but I suppose it's just one of those things to make you want to play the other character if you've played this one first. And I haven't yet gone through as Ellen in the Swamp of Oblivion to see what happens when she gets to the end that way. Meanwhile, time to talk to everyone. I don't know if there are a whole lot of places for someone to hide at the henge. Although I guess most of the villagers stay away from it. That's a good point. I mean, that is what we were going to ask Dr. Lester about. He never told either character. Well, now that she said that, we know she's going to get murdered right before she's going to tell us anything. That seems to be the way everything goes here. I wish I knew. I really do. There's a lot of mystery going on, and the answers just remain a little bit out of reach. Of course, we're told that there are 2 more realms, so I guess that's kinda how they pace this thing. I think I'm gonna need much stronger antidepressants before I go talk to her again. Although, I suppose if you look at it the right way, the Netherworld is infinitely removed from our own universe, if perhaps infinitely close, so maybe it's not a lie. And Mrs. Lester's home. And this would, of course, be why the church was unlocked when Keats went there, because Mrs. Lester had already unlocked the door. So there you have it. Two conflicting accounts. Dr. Lester says he's responsible for the results of 17 years ago. Hervé says he wasn't. Hervé says Cecilia's alive, but Mrs. Lester says she's dead. What is the truth? And more importantly, who's going to be the next one to look for it? Ellen or Keats? Let me know what you think, and I'll give you guys the results next time.